Chantis Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on the EARTHDAWN Roleplaying game system. Well, where we last off, we were talking about resolving attacks. The main action you're going to be doing as part of combat. Well, we just talked about resolving your attacks. Let's talk about the next step. Damage. If I've successfully resolved an attack against you, it's time for me to roll my damage step to figure out how much damage I'm actually dealing to you. Now, most weapons will define what their damage step is of that weapon. Unless otherwise stated, you will take this damage step and you will add that to your strength step to get the total step you're going to be using to determine the damage you're going to be dealt. Specific attacks or abilities will state if they do not use strength or if they use a different attribute instead of strength. Some talents or abilities allow you to use karma in this damage step, and also if you had bonus die do not just apply to the attack step, they also apply to the damage step. That's important to note. Now, spells cast by a magician usually call for something completely different. They have an effect test to determine the amount of damage. Most effect tests by magicians call upon their willpower instead of strength. They don't use strength for spells, they use willpower. They can also use bonuses and also add things such as will force as a bonus to these dice step. If it called for it, this effect step, once you've completed, is doing damage too. So once these steps have been rolled, the tests have been rolled for your damage test, you have the amount of damage points unmodified heading towards the target, which is now when we move into the next portion of this, armor and shield. Technically, this is defenses as a whole, because armor and shields adds to the natural armors of a character, whether they have physical armor, and sometimes it will add to mystic armor. Physical armor is for physical attacks. Mystic armor is for psychic attacks or certain astral attacks. If you are uncertain what type of armor this attack will go against, it is up to the GM to determine what it actually is. Now, it is important to note, even if you're wearing armor and shields, some spells and ability ignore the armor and shield you're wearing. You're just going to use your normal mystic armor or physical armor against this attack. You don't add the extra layers to it. Now, once you, though, determine what kind of defense you have, when you have the attack coming at you, the damage points we checked on before, you're going to subtract your either physical defense armor or mystic armor from the damage points being dealt, and the remaining damage is what's going to be applied to you. You're basically going to add that to your damage points taken pool. Now, some attacks penetrate armor as a whole. This would include both your normal physical armor and any armor you're adding from something you're wearing. This is something like an armor-defeating attack. Other abilities, spells, and talents specifically say they do the same. Regardless of whatever it's doing, creature abilities sometimes have this. Creature abilities and spells. That's an important one to note too, that creatures could have this. But regardless, once it has been applied to you, you basically do not subtract your armor. The unmodified test results from the damage test, that is what's added to you as damage points. Now, if you suffer damage points from a single attack equal to or greater than your wound threshold, you get a wound. A wound is a grievous injury that basically interferes with your ability to recover. If you would be receiving a wound and being knocked either unconscious or dead as a result of the attack, you still make note of that wound, because the wound still will interfere with healing abilities, and there are some healing abilities that could help you out either when you're unconscious or freshly dead, either to save your life in that one. So it can have an effect. Now, damage points as they are dealt, and wounds are a measure of what the damage and the injury that your body is taking. But they really don't account for everything. There are such things as doing damage to specific limbs or causing bleeding. I will be talking about those in a later episode, but just know there are other forms of things that can do damage, at least other effects that are hitting you. Now, you might have to worry about being knocked down by an attack. If the amount of damage that you're being dealt is equal to or greater than your wound threshold, you have to check to see if you're knocked down. So I'm taking this wounding attack, I have to make a knockdown test. You use your strength step as action die against the knockdown difficulty of 3 plus the amount of damage over your wound threshold you took. If you are successful in this test, you remain standing. If you fail at it, you are knocked down by that attack. There are other things which may cause knockdown not related to a wound, other talents and abilities. They specifically will say they will call for a knockdown test as part of them. Now, after the damage is dealt, you have to check for either being unconscious or dead. If you are unconscious, you check that the amount of damage points dealt to your character is equal to or exceeds your unconscious rating. If it is, you fall unconscious. You're effectively blind, you're effectively knocked down for the purposes of any kind of attacks or abilities that would affect you directly. The only thing you can do while you are unconscious is make a recovery test. You will remain in that unconscious state until you can succeed on a recovery test enough to drop your damage points dealt to you below your unconscious rating. That point in time, you can finally pop back up, be awake again, be ready to once again jump into the fray. Now, similarly, we would check for death. If your damage points dealt to you is equal to or greater than your death rating, you're dead. As simple as that. Well, not so simple. You might have a talent or ability which might protect you to a degree from death at this point in time. Also, traditionally, it's given an opportunity for other characters around you to possibly do something to save your life. If they can give you emergency treatment or some kind of healing right then and there, they have the possibility of saving your life. But it is a cinematically short period of time that they can attempt to do this. More than likely, when your damage points have exceeded this point in time, you're dead. Simple as that. You're gone, you're deceased, you're dead. Now, this isn't to say this isn't the final thing. As rare as it is, and I mean it is rare, there is always the possibility of resurrection. It does exist in this world. But as I said, it's very hard to find. It's very powerful abilities, so there is this level of trying to use this powerful ability, and it tends to be incredibly expensive to use. So not only do you have to seek it out, it's very powerful to use, so you either have to find someone powerful enough to use it, or have someone powerful enough on your team. It's also then expensive. So you can see how resurrection is something that is usually not an option because of this difficulty. But that's it for today. I finished up most of the steps you're going to be taking to resolve combat attacks. I pretty much went over all the important steps you're going to have to go through, resolving it down to the end there. This included, of course, seeing how much damage the attack is being dealt, comparing it to armor and seeing, how much actual damage is being dealt to the target, whether this armor is overcome or not, situational. Then we, of course, look to the status of you after you've taken this damage, the target that's taken this damage. Do you get a wound? Are you knocked down? Are you unconscious? Are you dead? All four of these things are important questions you have to ask once you've taken that damage. Now, of course, yes, more than likely you're going to have your either physical or mystic armor be applied as a defense against this, so you do not take as much as you could from each attack. But the more attacks you have, the more damage it is, the more likely you're going to get one of those situations occurring that might lead to the end of your character over the course of a battle. An epic fight between you and whatever you've gotten in a fight with that's resolving an attack against you. Next time, we're going to talk about shields and the special rules for that, and then we're going to talk about that injury I talked about, which of course is injury to limbs, wounds to limbs, damage to limbs, all those things, and of course, bleeding. We'll talk about those sort of combination of things. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows support the channel, the empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon, link description below. There's some great rewards there. It helps to improve and grow the channel. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.